Of Asian carp that were introduced into the United States. So there is the black carp, grass carp, big head carp, and silver carp. And they are invasive because they do not belong in the United States. They're from Asia, China region. They were brought in the 70s for aquaculture purposes and sewage treatment plants. And we are now concerned about them because they have no natural predators and some of their natural characteristics. Basically, they are making their way in towards. You absolutely can eat the carp. I've never had one. I can't tell you if they're any good, but apparently, if you have a good chef, they are good. We're also shipping them. We're basically commercially fishing them and shipping them over to China where they're a delicacy. They can be used as fertilizer, so there are some commercial uses for them. Unfortunately, right now we can't keep up with the population numbers. There are different theories on what could potentially happen. There's the theory that they could decimate the Great Lakes fisheries, that they would outcompete the native fisheries, in particular the sports fishery, the salmon, the trout, that is about worth $7 billion across the Great Lakes. In addition, the silver carp in particular is known for jumping about 10 feet in the air. They get spooked by boat motors, so it can be a potential hazard for recreation in the Great Lakes. For boaters, skiers, jet skiers. So it could definitely change the Great Lakes as we know it if they do thrive. In Michigan, they would enter through the Chicago area waterway system. Basically, that is a canal that we created over 100 years ago. It was created in Chicago. They used to get their well, they still get their drinking water out of Lake Michigan, but they used to also put their sewage into Lake Michigan. So they were getting their drinking water where they were putting their sewage. So they created a canal system to divert and send their sewage the other way. So we created a system that created the Mississippi River Basin and created a link between the Mississippi River Basin and the Great Lakes. And that created a link to allow the Asian carp to potentially enter the Great Lakes. Yes, there's actually, they can come in through Lake Erie. They are in the Wabash River, which can essentially flood over into the Maumee, which is a tributary into Lake Erie. So that's currently in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they temporarily put up a fence to stop that during flooding, but they're going to have to put up more we have not been able to eradicate one single invasive species from the Great Lakes, and we have had over 185 aquatic invasive species introduced in the Great Lakes ecosystem, and not one has been eradicated. It will be testing and monitoring. And what we're doing right now is called eDNA testing, and that's what they're doing in the Chicago area waterway system, where basically they take water samples and they're able to determine from those water samples if there was DNA from either the big head or the silver carp. Those are the two that we're most concerned about in those specific areas. And we've had hits basically in Lake Michigan. The state of Michigan is going to be ramping up and doing some testing in our waters here. It sounds very simple. I'm sure it's much more complicated than even I realized, but they very simply go out and they take a water sample, and from that water sample they're able to strain out DNA and determine if it's Asian carp, and then determine which specific species it is. It is limited. All it can tell us is an Asian carp was present. It cannot tell us how many, cannot tell us when it was there, it cannot tell us the age, it cannot tell us how long ago it was there. So There are some limitations. Well, basically what we've done when we've found hits beyond, currently what we have in place is an electrical barrier which is designed to prevent the Asian carp from coming through. When we find eDNA hits beyond the barrier, we typically do a rapid response action or a response action based upon the hits that are found, and that can entail doing additional testing, doing electrofishing, netting, all sorts of additional techniques trying to actually find the Asian carp. We've done chemicals. In worst case scenarios. Rotenone is a very nasty chemical, but a vital chemical, unfortunately, in the fight that we have with Asian carp. It will kill everything at this point in time, the way we have it. It has been used twice in the fight against Asian carp. It was used once. The electrical barriers that we have are electrical systems. They have to be shut down. They have to be managed and, fixed, just like every other electrical system we have. So when we shut down a system, we did an entire rotenone treatment of the river system to make sure that no Asian carp would get through while the barrier was down. When we did that, there was an Asian carp that was found, so it was in the area and could have potentially gotten through. There was another treatment that was done when there was eDNA found. But unfortunately it kills everything in the river system. One of the things the USGS, which is the United States Geological Survey, is looking at is developing pellets specifically that only the Asian carp will use. Basically what they do is they put in the rotenone and then they put in another chemical afterwards to essentially disperse the rotenone. But I do believe they don't allow humans in the river system for a while, but it does disperse fairly quickly. And none of the fish that are collected after the rotenone treatment, because they collect all the dead fish, are allowed to be it depends on where you're talking about. If you're talking about the Chicago area waterway system, it is a ecological, hydrological, however you want to say it, separation. Basically, reversing what was done over 100 years ago to stop the linkage between the Mississippi River Basin and the Great Lakes Basin. What to do down in Fort Wayne, Indiana is a little bit different because, it's a wetland complex that floods, and so that's going to require a little bit more research. But the primary focus right now for everyone is the Chicago area waterway system and its ecological separation. That is actually not underway. What they're doing right now, the Army Corps of Engineers is doing a study looking at how to prevent aquatic invasive species from entering the Great Lakes in general. They do have a focus on the Asian carp and the Chicago area waterway system, but they're also looking at 48 other species that they've identified, and they're looking at the entire Great Lakes Basin. And that funding is coming from the federal government, but there's also other individual studies that are taking place because the federal government has a tendency to move a little slow, and their study will not be done at least until 2015. So other entities are stepping up to the plate and doing studies specifically for Asian carp, specifically for the Chicago area waterway system in the meantime. And those would be grant funded through private foundations, the Joyce Foundation. The rotenone is very successful. Kills anything and everything. But that's also, not a permanent method. to deal with the Asian carp. Our purpose is not to continuously kill the entire river ecosystem. We want to address the species that is problematic, not necessarily the
Yes,
public can do a few things. One, there is a bill that has been introduced in the federal government. There's been a few bills introduced, but that would require that the Army Corps of Engineers speed up their study, which would require them to get the study completed in 18 months, which is much sooner than 2015, which is what we need. So they can contact their elected officials. In addition, we also will need the support of the entire Congress, which of course is not just the Great Lakes. So sharing information with family and friends. I don't know how many people in Arizona know about the Asian carp, but the waterway system definitely affects the entire country. Zebra mussels have made it all the way to California. They came from us. So the waterway system being open definitely affects the entire country. So if we can close it, we can help prevent future things. And then identification of larval Asian carp. They don't accidentally put Asian carp into the Great Lakes, because some of the larval Asian carp look very similar to
you find an Asian carp?
In Michigan, you can go to the Michigan DNR website. They have a reporting, an online reporting form that you do, and you get it out of the water, and you keep it out of the water. Don't put it back into the water. And you get it to basically proper authorities, which would be the Department of Natural Resources.